We're going to be a guest today on Nora Firestone's radio show, and we're looking forward to joining that broadcast momentarily. This is on WKQA Freedom 1110 on your AM dial in Hampton Roads, Virginia. Looking forward to being on this show. Yes?
Yeah, you there?
Yes.
Yeah. I know that was quick, right? That was quick. Well, don't worry, because I've got plenty to say. In fact, I've got like kind of a long bit of something I'm going to rehash and share in a little bit. But I don't know. I mean, this on the way to the studio earlier today. I thought, let me get your take on this. I believe, I absolutely wholeheartedly believe that we are watching the attempted execution of the long-planned implosion of America, the controlled demolition that's been planned and prepped by social engineers for more decades, Drew, Nickell, than either one of us has been alive. The planned, the controlled demolition, the implosion of our free society, one of the last bastions of freedom, if not the last, worldwide. Look at what government has been doing, and now that Mr. Biden is in office, he's just free with his 50-some-odd executive orders and mandates and whatever, I forget the other word for them. They're all set to execute this implosion of American society.
As you've indicated, this has been developing for quite some time, but not so much on the accelerated path as it has been beginning with the Clinton administration and then, of course, with the Obama administration. And I also am sad to report on the day after Rush Limbaugh died from stage 4 lung cancer, it was announced today that former Senator and Vice President Bob Dole is in stage 4 lung cancer. He's 97 years old.
Oh.
And so, on the day after Senator Dole made that announcement, and my thoughts go out to his wife, Libby, as he's had a lot of health issues since being wounded in action in the Italian campaign during World War II. And, it's amazing that given all of those health issues, he's been able to live such a very long life. But our thoughts and prayers, and I'm sure a lot of your listening audience, go out to Mr. and Mrs. Dole, as well as the widow Catherine of Rush Limbaugh, who passed yesterday after a courageous fight of the same disease.
Yep. Thank you for that. And I was so sad. I cried on the way home listening to the news of Rush's passing. Of course, we all knew it was coming. But I don't know. I just kind of had in mind, well, it's not going to happen until it happens, and knowing him, it'll be a while.
Well, it's not an understatement at all, and I think that the management of WKQA in Norfolk would agree that almost single-handedly in the late 1980s, Rush Limbaugh saved AM daytime talk radio, and
what do you think, Andy?
all of the talk show hosts that have followed the Don Imuses of the world, Glenn Beck, Neil Bortz, they all built their highways on the trails that Rush blazed. And it's just phenomenal.
I love Michael Savage. Who was around first, Savage or Rush?
Well, here's the thing. There was a lot of talk show prior to Rush, but none had gone national in syndication. So, for instance, when you're hearing Don Imus in New York, you wouldn't be hearing, say, Don Imus in Atlanta or New Orleans. Rush made it a coast-to-coast thing.
Listening to Imus,
So Rush made it a nationwide thing, And you think of all the little things, Rush was technologically savvy. He tested a lot of new devices, used to send iPads and iPhones, basically gave them out like candy on his show for a while. And he also, and this is quite amazing, he also was quite a reader. He had an extensive personal library. The excellence on his show came from thorough research and preparation for those shows. He worked very, very hard.
Yeah.
And it's incredible when you think about some of the everyday names we think about today. Snapple, the Snapple iced tea. Snapple was nothing until they hired Rush Limbaugh to promote it on his show, and it ever since it's sold like gangbusters. So he was a pioneer in the reincarnation of AM radio. Incidentally, the United States are the only country that have automobiles fitted now with AM radios. You won't find those in Europe or anywhere else. AM radio, which was the first broadcast radio band, is now basically an American enterprise. And that's, again, thanks to Rush Limbaugh. We have AM radios. We have AM radios to this day in brand new cars because he saved AM radio. It was on the way out when he started his show.
That's really interesting. Sometimes you can hear an AM signal from here all the way over across the Atlantic Ocean.
Yes,
in another country.
Yes, because when the amplitude is modulated, AM stands for amplitude modulation, it can carry a lot further. The reason which made FM preferred for music is FM can reproduce stereo sound, which AM cannot, and that's why your music became an FM thing, and AM was left to talk radio.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Well, speaking of Rush, back to that, I used to listen to him all the time. As a professional writer, I cannot have the radio on while I am working.
Yeah.
I can't be listening to somebody else speaking while I'm trying to listen to the voice in my head telling me what to write. But for years and years and years and years, when in the middle of the day, my primary job was, raising a family and working around that, doing my work around that, I was able to, and I did, always have the AM radio on, and I would listen to great talk radio, including, of course, Rush Limbaugh. And I just always had the utmost respect and admiration for, what he did, who he was, what he did, how he did it, why he did it, how well he communicated and how well informed he was, and his ability to then communicate, to whittle down to the core of what was important about what he was learning or discovering. And then, mine that, bring that up and out and shine it up and crystallize it for his audience to understand, so to take, hours or days or years worth of information that he would just condense down into, hey, here's the nut that you really need to understand, and to be able to communicate that effectively. He was great.
Great. And part of what made him great was he was very smart, very quick-witted, and his shows at times were absolutely hilarious. If you've ever heard some of the song parodies he put together where he would, he was talking about Ted Kennedy's womanizing, and he did a play on a song, and it was, about Ted Kennedy with a tattoo on his chest, and he flanders round and round, and I mean, those kinds of parody songs he did. And then when he would do his updates, if he had a Ted Kennedy update, he would play that song. And I'm telling you, at the time I started listening to Rush, I was traveling for a living. I was a traveling sales representative, driving thousands of miles every month, and I would listen to Rush, And it was all I could do to keep the car steered straight sometimes because he would just have me cracking up laughing. So,
Yeah, that's
I stopped listening to him when I came in off the road because for whatever reason, my house never did receive AM radio signals very well where I'm located. But every once in a while, if I'm in the car at lunchtime, I'll turn him on, and he is
yeah.
going to be missed. There's no doubt about it. If you think about it, Rush Limbaugh was Rand Paul, was Donald Trump, was every true conservative libertarian before there were such things, quote unquote, as libertarians, and when conservatives were trying to find a voice after Ronald Reagan's presidency. Rush Limbaugh stepped in and filled that void and left, the political winds open for a Rand Paul and a libertarian movement and a Tea Party and a President Trump. Those things happened because Rush Limbaugh got the conversation going.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is, I don't know, you can bang your head against the wall when you are a person trying to communicate these very critical points and the importance of them to any audience. And when in the hopes that the way you are enlightening people will help to preserve the virtues of, for instance, in this case, Americanism, right?
Right.
And for more than 30 years, that's what he did. And again, I say banging his head against the wall because I know that's what it feels like for me sometimes. And I know, and I've talked to many others out there doing, with the same thing in maybe some different way, but, it feels like that to everybody sometimes. I don't know if it ever felt like that to him because the other part of it, the bigger, much bigger part of it is how enjoyable it is to be able to do that for somebody for whom this is a true passion, for all the right reasons. And so, I would say, yeah, we bang our heads against the wall, trying to enlighten people, whatever. Who knows who's listening? Who knows how it impacts people? Who knows what effect it may or may not have? The one thing I think is the ultimate goal for so many, and I would assume this about Rush Limbaugh, is, that come on, people, take your heads out of the quicksand, look at this, listen to what we are telling you, in his case, listen to what I'm telling you, and turn this ship around. Warning, we are headed toward, total destruction of American life. Warning, and for people to not, in his lifetime, with all of the effort, all of the hard work, all of the intelligence and excellence in broadcasting that he truly did bring to this table, and with which he helped to construct that table, right? In his lifetime, I wonder how frustrating it may or may not have been for him to say, but it still didn't work because here we are.
Well,
and that's probably not the overriding feeling he died with, because he so enjoyed what he did. He so, appreciated, what a privilege it was to be able to take his great skill set and bring it to the world the way he did. But still, I just wonder.
Well, in knowing Rush Limbaugh as a broadcaster, because I, of course, didn't have any opportunity to ever meet him personally, but knowing him as a broadcaster, Rush Limbaugh, he was nothing if not the eternal optimist.
Yeah.
And that optimist was born of a love for this country like few broadcasters have ever had. You and I have talked about the leftward slope of political discourse in the last 70 years. But I'll say this. If you think of radio in terms of it being about 100 years old, 102 years ago, commercial radio did not exist. My father was born in 1914. He was 6.5 years old when the first presidential election results were broadcast on KDKA in Pittsburgh in 1920. And this was a new medium. So it's about 100 years old. And for a third of that time period, Rush Limbaugh has led the ratings on AM radio. 1/3 of that time. That's phenomenal. That
Yeah.
is a radio presence we won't see its like again. He's Babe Ruth. He's Johnny Unitas. He is
Mhm.
the George Washington when it comes to the beginning of conservative talk radio in this country, because prior to then, it was dominated by leftists only. The media is still dominated by leftists, but AM radio is actually dominated by conservative talk show hosts. It's the only medium we have in this country that's dominated by conservatism.
Right, right. And it's so threatening to others that they have been trying to censor and shut it down.
Oh, I'm
Shut
telling you.
down people, of this perspective, for so long. Yeah, well, yeah. So I want to rehash some points because I've had many conversations the past couple of weeks, and not deep enough or not long enough conversations, because just by virtue of the amount of time that we had, but with people who either are on the side of who are advocates of the rise of socialism in America, which is again inherently anti-American, but so they're advocates, or they're not as staunch opponents, and so I kind of dug up a few points from over the years. These are certainly not the best points, probably, but they're just some that I was able to pull out, kind of last minute, that might help make a few points. And again, I preface this by reminding anybody who needs it, or anyone who doesn't know. All of my perspectives and thoughts and everything are based on my own observations, my original, things that I've said. I don't rehash what I hear other people talk about or whatever. Very often, years after I've been saying something is when I hear other people on the air start saying it. So some of this might sound like, oh yeah, well, so I heard somebody saying that same thing the other day. Well, I've been saying this for decades, this stuff. So, I want to touch on this whole SWAM, small women and minority-owned business concept. Small, fine. Small should be on its own. Small businesses, you want to enable small businesses to maybe be building something for themselves, but even with that, I don't think there should be any type of public-private partnership, any kind of form of that across America. But I want to talk briefly about why I'm a staunch opponent of SWAM, and then elaborate a little bit with some points that I've made in the past. But the SWAM concept and similar programs, the line in my email closing, my email signature says, not that I am not SWAM certified or big on diversity initiatives, because just as I opposed people being oppressed based upon race, ethnicity, and gender, I oppose people being advanced based upon race, ethnicity, and gender. And a friend told me a few years ago that with that statement, I had opened her mind to an entirely new perspective on that matter, because until then, she had thought it was fine, and that it made complete sense after I had elaborated for her with the following point. And so that is this. And the reason I bring it up again now is because there are younger generations who have been conditioned to think nothing of this stuff. They think this is normal. They have no other frame of reference, right? In a lot of ways. So, I had talked about on my show years ago, I get so sick of all this big government involvement in business, claiming that they are leveling some quote-unquote unfair playing field, and yet they're doing it by digging holes beneath the feet of some people in in order to build mounds beneath the feet of others. It is not government's job to force me or you, Drew Nickell, or anybody else out there, not Arthur, not Michelle, not Lance, not Rich, Marianne, all the people I know are watching and listening. It is not government's job to force any of us to hand over a portion, let's say it's, for me, to hand over a portion of my money so that government can develop and staff and maintain and promote unnecessary programs, especially those that aim to cultivate, assist, and empower my own competition in business. And I don't understand what people don't understand about that concept.
Well, I'll tell you, I think about this. Because there's a lot of people I'm sure listening that think some of those business carve-outs are good because it, quote unquote, evens the playing field. Here's the point I'm making. Capitalism is by definition a competitive enterprise, and anytime you favor one business over another based on that demographic, you've already introduced an artificial measure of success. For instance, let's say for some reason in the last 20 years, the federal government decided that they were going to award contracts and they were going to favor the group of business professionals who were less than 5'7" tall. That would be wonderful for Nora Firestone, but that would be terrible for Drew Nickell because I'm taller than 5'7" and you're shorter than 5'7". And based on that criteria, what makes your business better than mine? It can't be based on that, but we have a situation where people in pursuit of equity, they're using the excuse of equality. Equality means you and I have the same chance. Equity means they're going to tilt the playing field so that you and I end up even.
Yeah, right, exactly. And that's always been part of my point. There's an injustice inherent within it, right? Some of them say, well, Nora, you can get SWAM certified too, and then you'll be benefiting from that money. But just like you said, they're missing the point. And the point is this: my father, my brothers, my sons, my male friends like you, Drew Nickell, right? My significant partner, right? Nobody should have to fork over money to benefit me because I'm a woman or because of anything else about me, right? And it's not government's job to be, backing any businesses in America. So I've been pointing out for many, many years the irony of the underlying messages inherent in that kind of forced charity and including, by virtue of the fact that you're a woman or by virtue of the country from which you or your ancestors came, in other words, some quote-unquote minority, which we shouldn't be classifying people like that anyway, right? But by virtue of those things, you are innately, inherently less capable, less competent, less quote-unquote privileged, and more disadvantaged than somebody else. In this case, than the quote-unquote privileged white man. That is absurd. That is a racist, misogynist, and condescending message, right?
And it doesn't even stop there, because just this week, the U.S. House of Representatives have started hearings to discuss the efficacy of paying reparations to African Americans based on a historical record of slavery. The last slave died in 1971. His name was Sylvester McGee. He should maybe have been entitled to reparations for his slavery, but everyone that's come after him has not experienced slavery in this country, and it's insane to say that taxpayers should fork the bill so that money can go from one pocket into somebody else's pocket.
Right. It's just an excuse for them to take our money and redistribute it. But here's
what does that lead to? What does that lead to? If that's the mindset, then why not have a Caucasian tax?
Right. It never ends
right?
with them because they think they own our money. Right. But here's what I've been saying about reparations for years and years since I first heard the idea be brought up. Okay, for many years I've been saying this, and I welcome anybody who wants to call the show and debate this with me. Please, 757-222-3705. I'd be very happy, Drew and I'd be very happy to hear your perspective on this. But here's what I say about that, and I've been saying for years. So if you've ever heard anybody else say it, I've been saying this long before anybody I've ever known to say it. But the true, just reparations can only be gotten in one way, and that is, anybody seeking reparations for that, go back to Africa, find the descendants of the people in Africa, the tribal people in Africa who kidnapped, kept, and sold your ancestors on the slave trade they created. That's where your reparations come from, baby. Go do it. Good luck.
Well, it's even harder than that, because think of this. First of all, you have a tremendous amount of people who come from multiple racial backgrounds, their ancestry. So if they descend from both white and black, like Barack Obama, he was descended from a black African, and his mother was descended from slaveholding whites. Should he pay or be paid? You see the problem?
I know.
Yeah, and it gets even more ridiculous. What about all the African Americans in this country who descended from people who emigrated here after slavery? Should they be entitled? I mean, this is a mess of unbelievable proportions. It can't work, but it keeps the dialogue alive that blacks are disadvantaged because of white supremacists and white privilege. And I don't know about you, Nora. I've been looking around my office for weeks and weeks, and I cannot find my white privilege card to save my life. Maybe you've borrowed it.
Well, yeah, Drew, it's because it's fantasy, Drew. It's imagination. Yeah, it's virtual reality.
You know, I have a checkbook, and I write in black ink on a white check, but that doesn't make either one racist. It's just a fact. And everybody who is an American has a checkbook, whether they have a lot of money in it or no money in it. They may not even have an account. But poverty and wealth know no racial bounds, and therefore race as a determining factor should not be a criteria in any way or any form, because once you make race a factor, then somebody is going to be slighted, and we're back to where we were.
I know. And I've said this too. The truth is that not too many people in America who consider themselves, quote unquote, disadvantaged, whatever, whoever they are, I don't even think about the pigmentation of a person's skin when I'm talking about this. I mean, people are people. We all have minds. We all use them to one extent or another, for good or for bad, whatever. So anyone in America, right? The truth is that not too many people in America who consider themselves disadvantaged or, have been inappropriately influenced by others to begin seeing themselves as so are actually disadvantaged by anything except their own crippling sense of victimhood, helplessness, and resentment, and the very real disempowerment that ensues when they act on those senses, when they relinquish their sense of personal responsibility for their own lives as the sovereign individuals they actually are, and in doing so, they succumb to the natural consequences of such things as perpetual resentment and perpetual personal irresponsibility.
I mean, it's
self-inflicted.
Exactly.
For the most part.
It would be kind of like, my lovely wife Mariella likes to bake cakes,
I love Mariella,
cookies, etc. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So would I be right to blame her for my weight problem because she makes delicious cookies?
That is
She doesn't force them into my big mouth. And she doesn't force me to chew them up and swallow. And I have my day of reckoning every time I have my A1C checked by my doctor. So I can't blame anyone but myself for that. And to blame anyone else is ridiculous. I can't blame Mariella for my weight loss any more than I can blame Nora Firestone for the theft of my white privilege card.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of it. In America, we have choice, right? Or traditionally, that's what we were, one of the virtues, the founding virtues, of America. We have the choice to engineer our own lives. And, we're human. Of course we're going to make mistakes, but who outside of the context, within the context of not impeding on the rights of others, I can't go murder somebody, right? That impedes upon their rights to their personal, individual sovereignty. Okay, so outside of that, I am free to make whatever mistakes I need to make on my personal journey. My personal journey as a sovereign individual in this world is nobody else's business. If I want to, and people have different levels of ambition and people have different priorities. Not everybody wants to or needs to go to college to get an education. People get great educations from whatever sources they want, or they don't, and that's their choice.
And it's the
thing. Right.
It's the same thing about
arrogance about social engineers. It's social engineers are arrogant people because they look at you, Drew Nickell, and say, I know better than you do about how to run your life and the decisions that you need to be making and the thoughts that you need to be thinking. So I want to engineer your life.
Well, it's kind of like, this. We're hearing discussion about doubling the minimum wage, the national minimum wage to $15 an hour, which may be fine in New York, but it's going to be way too much in Oklahoma City. But here's the thing: minimum wage was never meant to be a survival wage.
Right.
When I was 16 years old, I got a job with the City of Virginia Beach, Department of Parks and Recreation, as a 16-year-old lifeguard at Little Island Beach Park, and I was paid $2.43 an hour. Did I want to stay at that wage level for the rest of my life? Of course not.
Right.
I thought I was big to do the next summer when I got a raise to $2.58 an hour. The point is, I wasn't content to be a lifeguard the rest of my life, although with all of the fringe benefits, traveling in two-piece bathing suits, it was tempting. But I did not want to remain a lifeguard for the rest of my life. I wanted bigger and better things. And that's the point of a starting job. So you learn the basics, show up on time, do what you're told, be reliable. And you're earning minimum wage while you're learning those skills so that your next job, you've got a reference and you'll make more money. That's the whole idea behind starting out a starting wage, but it was never meant to keep you alive. You're not going to pay food and rent on a minimum wage, nor does anybody expect you to.
Right.
And when you raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, you have killed summer jobs for everybody under 22 years old.
Yeah. It is an entry-level wage for an entry-level position, whereby people have the opportunity to gain training, education, and experience in a field, or just be earning money while they're maybe going to school or whatever. And then, what people with the entitlement mindset say, oh, I don't want to take advantage of, I don't want to put in any effort to take advantage of some opportunity. I'm not interested in the opportunities. Just give me the results of what I would get if I were to put in the effort to follow that opportunity. That's what I want. That's where I'm headed. Just give it to me now.
Well, I mean, let me tell you something. 50% of working that first starter job, and I'm saying this for the benefit of any of you youngsters out there that haven't entered the workforce, 50% of your success depends strictly on showing up on time. Which, if you think about it,
you're there.
yeah, but in other words, show up when you're supposed to. Be on time. Be punctual. If you do that, half the battle's done. Now it's a matter of being honest and doing your job. And if you do it well enough, you're going to get a raise, or you're going to go to the competitor who will pay you more. That's the way the system works.
Your own way up.
Right. That's the way the system works.
Right. It's not incumbent upon anybody else who's supposed to be focused on their job, their work, their life, their obligations to be, boosting somebody else up.
And if you don't agree, and you think the minimum wage standard should be doubled to $15 an hour, then if you want to make it a living wage, why don't we make it $50 an hour or $100 an hour? We know we don't want to make it $50 or $100 an hour because the person serving you a Big Mac at $100 an hour is going to charge you $100 for that Big Mac. That's why we can't have ridiculously high minimum wages. It's too inflationary.
Yeah, and it's funny when I'm at a supermarket or a fast food place or whatever, and I hear people complain about how everything's automated. They've got to do their own checkouts and ordering and all this stuff, and and there are no jobs for their kids, and blah blah blah. Well, right there in front of our faces is the natural consequence of that. The natural consequence of businesses having to cut back on employment and labor because of the wages and the regulations and the anybody who hasn't owned a business probably most people would not understand all the additional money that the employer is investing in many ways, not investing, but has to pay, on many levels, just to support each employee, in terms of what they have to pay the government over and above what the employee has any idea the employer is paying.
Think of it mathematically speaking. If I own a business, you can name the kind of business. Mm-hmm. If I own a business where I have 6 employees and they are making $10 an hour, and the government comes in and says, you must pay them $15 an hour, I've just laid off 2 of my employees to make ends meet. It creates more, and the higher that goes, the more employees I'm going to have to lay off. And eventually it'll get to the point where I'll look for robotic answers to what used to be human jobs, like McDonald's, where you see it's completely robotic. You go in, you order from a robot, your food is delivered on a conveyor belt, and you have no human interaction. And that's becoming more and more standard in airports and big cities because the cost of paying people these high minimum wages and the lack of reliability of some of these workers has almost necessitated a technological alternative.
Success is a result, an outcome. It's supposed to be the fruit of somebody's own efforts. And most often, after years of life's lessons and observations and even failures, success is not a right. It's not something anybody owes you, and it's not a matter of equity either, like we were talking about earlier, to make some case for social engineering. If we're talking legitimate social justice, then we are talking equality in pursuit of or creation of opportunity. And then you would have to admit that it is not incumbent upon me to be funding somebody else's advantage over me in business or anybody else's route that they choose.
Taking that back to our earlier discussion about set-asides and privileges for certain groups, consider George Washington Carver. This man was a slave. Yeah. After the Civil War, he educated himself, ended up getting a PhD, and had the first patent on a home item many of us have grown up on, and that's peanut butter. Now, peanut butter was another 40 years before it fell into popular use, but he got the first patent on peanut butter, and he did so in the 1880s after having grown up a slave. He had no advantages. There was no set-asides for him except his own hard work. And he discovered more about the peanut than any scientist has before or since. And that's my contribution to this discussion of Black history in Black History Month. I wanted to get that in.
Well, and here's the other thing is I so resent anybody out there who thinks who holds himself or herself up as the voice of all people.
Oh, tell me about it.
Himself or herself. So I have a lot of friends. I'm very fortunate to have a lot of friends. I love every single one of them. Many of them, and they're all of different skin pigmentations. Like I don't even the thought about that doesn't even occur to me. This person has this color skin. This person has that color skin. Like it just doesn't. It's not on my radar to even be thinking about that. Right? It doesn't matter. So when I hear somebody of dark skin pigmentation or somebody, who, of African descent or whatever, get up there and be positioning himself or herself as though he or she speaks for everybody who is Black, as if they all come from the same entitlement mindset. That is an insult because they don't.
Exactly. Of course they don't.
Up there and speaks on behalf of all women, and say that men are domineering, brutes with testosterone issues. They don't speak for me. I could not disagree more.
Well, I mean, think of it this way: my mother was the daughter of 200% Italians. She was a first generation Italian American, if you will. So that makes me half Italian American. And my father is Scots, Irish, and German. The point I'm making is this. If I thought for 1 minute that Nancy Pelosi and Andrew Cuomo and his brother Chris Cuomo and Madonna all spoke for Italian Americans, I would end it all. I would end it all. Because those four people are an embarrassment to anybody that pridefully calls themselves an Italian Americans. They are the stereotype where people are so ready to say, oh, well, Italians are mafiosi. Just because those guys? No. I don't buy it for a minute. They don't speak for me any more than Al Sharpton should speak for African Americans.
Al Sharpton does not speak for my friends. Right. My friends are just like no different from me in any way.
And even conservative media outlets refer to Al Sharpton as a civil rights leader. He's not a civil rights leader. He trades in race baiting. He is a race baiter. He is not a civil rights advocate. He never has been, ever since the lie he made up about Tawana Brawley. And how many people were killed in the riots as a result of that one? Yeah. I mean, I'm telling you something. I realize the first 3 centuries of this country's history, Black Americans had it bad. I fully admit it. But I also know that within the context of my lifespan, we have gone from water hoses and dogs to a truly colorblind society, and liberals and leftists are going to screw it all up and send it back 60 years. Obama almost sent back race relations 60 years, and this reparations movement, that'll finish it off.
Well, I mean, it's part of the social engineering, the idea of reparations, which is, a part of socialism, and so
I should be able to sue the inventors of Oreo cookies, which came out 2 years before my father was born in 1914. I should be able to sue them for the health damages as a result of eating too many Oreo cookies and having a lifetime of being overweight. That's the mindset, and it's crazy. It's crazy.
It is divide and conquer, pit people against one together, create all the divisiveness you can so that you weaken the entire, quote unquote, united people, right? So here's the thing, though, about, quote unquote, democratic socialism, right? So you want so-called democratic socialism in America? We already have that. It's called charity. Again, I've been saying this forever. The democracy in that, and I would say this, for instance, the reason I'm bringing it up is because, whether the issue is reparations or, any other issue, out there on the board, if it is a cause that you believe in, you can support that cause. You do not need to institute a political, governmental system, a systemic socialism and worse, that would force everybody else to also support, all the millions of causes out there that all these millions of collectives are clamoring for, right? So, for instance, you want so-called democratic socialism in America. We already have that. It's called charity. The democracy.
No, I take issue with that, because socialism is forced redistribution.
No, that's what I'm
saying. Charity is
Listen,
voluntary. Is voluntary.
That's my point. No, that's exactly my point. Right. That's what I'm saying. The democracy in charity is that you vote for the virtue of any given cause with the support of your own money or your time or whatever resources you have and choose to donate, right? The greatest virtue of charity is its voluntary nature. Exactly. It is unjust, though, to expect or much less demand or much less vote government to force that anybody else in the world put his or her resources behind any given cause just because somebody else deems it worthy and because somebody else would deem them greedy or culturally immoral or cancel worthy if they don't, right? So I'm going to just restate my long-standing quote, and then you can elaborate as well. My dad loves this quote, but it sums up the effects, and it goes right along with what you were just saying, Drew. When you mandate charity, you take away the two most powerful cogs in the machine, the goodwill and the gratitude, and instead you breed the resentment. You breed resentment and the entitlement mindset, and so that's an irrefutable, natural law truth right there. That sums it up, and the fact is, Drew, Nickell, that people who are instituting, these socialist policies, they need to listen to a quote like that and actually consider it. And then if they still proceed with their agenda, well, then they are just corrupt.
Well, they're not going to listen. They're not going to listen. They're not going to listen. And if you try to tell them this, they will somehow have your voice canceled, whether it's on social media, whether it's through other means. They will cancel. They're not interested in an open debate. And I'm going to tell you something. This is going to sound funny, but it's the death of liberalism. Liberalism being free thinking, an exchange of an idea. That's gone. We've replaced it with leftist socialism. And we can call it socialism, but what they're espousing really is communism. They just don't want to use that word because it doesn't sound good in this country. But 30 years ago, they were saying the thing about socialism. They wouldn't use that word because it wasn't politically correct in this country. So it's a gradual slide. And we're not but 30 years away from hearing about democratic communism. Is that what they're going to try to spin it to be next? It's crazy. But more important, it's dangerous. Because if socialism becomes the model on which the United States is based, we're finished as a country. We're finished as a country.
Yeah. The end destination of the path of socialism is, I used to always say, is communism. Now I say, and then I started saying, is communism or worse, because I knew there was something else bubbling up, and now I know what it is. Thanks to Pat Wood, I realized sometime last year, that worse is technocracy, because the technocracy is the total abuse of technology to control other
Well,
other people, and government
I agree in
eventually
some
won't have any
cases,
control.
but technocracies have never lined people up in a firing squad and shot them.
Well,
That's
they don't
coming,
need
and
to.
don't think it's not coming, because I'm going to tell you right now what I'm hearing out of some of these radicals in the District of Columbia. And it's not necessarily just congressmen and senators, it's also a lot of people who feel like there should be a death penalty for Donald Trump. And we should go into people's backgrounds and see if they supported Donald Trump, because they're going to be next on the agenda. This is how it starts. It sounds innocuous at first, but it leads towards executions.
Drew, that is facilitated and perpetuated by technocracy. Exactly what you're talking about. The only way that's possible is by virtue of technocracy.
Well, that's the means by which they're going about their thing. Did you hear Bill Gates this week, Mister? Who the hell do you think you are, telling me how to live my life because you invented a computer program? He's telling people we should give up eating beef and eat synthetic beef. I'm sorry, I don't want to go to Ruth Chris Steakhouse and order a filet mignon made out of plastic and vegetables.
Right. Yeah. Now that also is an element of technocracy. Technocracy is a very, very broad and deep subject. Very, very important. And if you go look it up, anybody out there, you should really go look at this. I mean, I've recommended this for a long, long time. Go learn about it, because you'll recognize the things that Drew Nickell was just talking about as what it actually is, and then you'll see the real depth of it and the real danger of it. Technocracy. So go to Pat Wood's, he's editor-in-chief over there, website, Technocracy News and Trends, and he culls information and articles about things that are really happening all over the world. I mean, we were talking years ago about the idea of social credits, and in China and stuff like that, and and here that's one thing that you're seeing implemented to be controlling people again. I mean, it's absolutely insidious. You have to look into this in order to be able to really understand it, and then be talking about it and warning people about it, because it works hand in hand, Drew, with communism. Only in the end, only one can win, because only one can be the all-powerful leader that each of them want to be. And technocracy will win. Technocracy will win, because right now in these stages, while they're both climbing, they're needing each other to climb over each other. It is a codependent relationship in a psychopathic world.
That and the fact that once you've gone down that road, there's no going back. Nora, any government that takes any specific freedom away from the individual, that individual doesn't get it back.
Right.
And I'm telling you, we are about an election or two away from losing our right to bear arms, losing our right to free speech, to free press, to free assembly. We're going to lose all of it if people don't wake up. And all you soccer moms out there that were offended by Donald Trump, Biden is what you got. And when they figure it out, he's too senile to be president, he's going to be followed by Kamala Harris, the most liberal member of the United States Senate. And this is what all you soccer moms that said, "Oh, I'm so offended by Donald Trump's tweets," got in return. I hope you're proud of your vote.
I know. Listen, a couple of things before we wrap it up, Drew Nickell. I want to warn people again, things that I've been talking about for years, but the reason I keep bringing them up is because, first of all, for new listeners, but also, if you don't already understand this, or if you have not already been taking this stuff seriously, day after day, hour after hour, day after day, week after week, it is more in your face. Now you can see what I'm talking about, what I've been talking about for all this time. Now you can see, oh yes, we really are on this path, and why we need to stop it. Okay, so a couple of things I want to urge you: watch for these things. Next week I'm going to be talking talking, more in depth about it as I have done in the past. But watch for these things and do not let them happen. The conversion of America to a cashless society. I've been warning since 2008. It will be, in order for the social engineers to implement and grow, establish, implement, grow, promote, and continue to perpetuate their agenda, they need your money. In order to get your money, they need full control of your money, and they need this in order to, they need to be able to tax, track, and withhold your money by any means.
Exactly.
In order to use it, at their discretion to, continue to perpetuate how they are working against you. In order to continue to perpetuate their inherently anti-American agenda. Do not let that happen. They've been marketing it to you without you even realizing it for decades, at least for decades, but absolutely for more than a decade that I've been seeing it and calling it out. Cash, everybody uses credit anyway. Everybody uses electronic transactions anyway. You're voluntarily choosing to do it. It's safer. It's this. It's that. It's better. Blah, 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 blah. No. Do not let it happen. If I die tomorrow, I want to know that you guys are not going to let that happen. Another thing, they're getting our kids hooked on the acceptance of credit and debt and electronic transactions and everything and collectivism, and all that, so don't let that happen. Watch for the banning of homeschooling. I've been warning for a long time. And furthermore, since you've got to be homeschooling your kids these days, I'll say it again, just take them out of the public school system and just do it your way. Homeschool your kids your way. All right, Drew Nickell, www.drewnickell.com. Anybody wants to follow him, I recommend that you do. Drew, baby, thank you. I love you.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you, Nora.
All right. All right. Everybody out there, thank you. Join me next Thursday on Freedom 1110 WKQA.